This $330 something million, this thing here is fugazi. It is not real. They didn't spend $37 million in Ohio. They spent $17.5. And they probably didn't spend $363 million either. They probably netted out right where James Gunn in the studio said they did. Probably right around $200 to $225 million. Because there ain't no way in hell that David Zaslav would have allowed a net spend or even a gross spend of $363 million for this movie. Online. And there was this story that was being promulgated out there even recently that Superman's budget was $125, $150 million more than what was being reported at $225 million. And a lot of that came from this. And this is a report that was being pulled from the state of Ohio and the film tax credit board entity, whatever the state of Ohio uses for this. And this was being shown as proof that Superman's budget or expense or cost of producing the film was much more than what was being suggested. And the problem with this was an application. This was not an actual tax filing. This wasn't a financial report. We talked about this Sunday. This $363 million total production budget was an estimate before a single bit of film had been shot for this movie. No pre-production, no filming, nothing, right? Nothing had been really done yet. Total eligible production expenditures and $37 million almost is what was being suggested to the state of Ohio. That was an estimate of what would be spent. I explained Sunday that applications for film tax credits are not the same things that we cover when it comes to the actual financial returns filed by the studios after the work has been done, like in the UK. Studios will file applications for film tax credit eligibility to secure a limited pool of funds, right? Or secure a portion of a limited pool of funds. So, for example, if the state of Ohio says, we're going to dedicate $100 million, and it's more than that, I'm sure, but $100 million to support film tax credits in the 2025 fiscal year, then productions that say, hey, we might be filming in Ohio are going to get in line early to secure, or you might interpret it as escrow, whatever portion of that $100 million film tax credit pool that they can. So when studios come in, they tend to, especially large-scale productions, they tend to overestimate. That doesn't mean they're getting the money up front. That doesn't mean they're committing fraud. Again, this is an application. It's not a financial report of actual expenses made. Well, it turns out that what I said Sunday and what I'm saying now was correct. So Superman production pumped $100 million into Georgia and Ohio as Man of Steel spread the wealth. This was filed on deadline today, July 16th. At about noon Eastern, just about 6 hours before showtime here. And I saw this and I said, ha, look at that. We got it right again. We told you this was coming. I didn't know they'd do a story on it, but I'm glad they did because, again, this is another teachable moment. DC Studios' blockbuster Superman reboot is flying at the box office, but its largesse began earlier with shooting in Georgia and Ohio, contributing more than $100 million in direct spending to local economies. Superman filmed a total of 68 days throughout the greater Atlanta region, accounting for $82.8 million in local economic activity. Direct spending, meaning this is what Warner Brothers and DC spent themselves. This doesn't include Superman, Lex Luthor, and Lois Lane going out to grab lunch or dinner or drinks after a 14-hour day of shooting on the set. This is just what DC and Warner Brothers spent. They go into some detail, state legislatures, this, that. Here we go. Ohio. Remember, we had the form up a minute ago for Ohio that said on the application, Warner Brothers suggested that they were making an estimate in order to secure part of the pool of film tax credits. They were estimating $37 million is what they were going to spend in Ohio. What was the actual final figure that they filed when they said, this is what we did spend? Superman filmed a total of 21 days in Cleveland, Ohio, contributing over $17.5 million in direct spending. I'm sorry, but I think $17.5 million is quite a bit less than 37. And people out there think that, again, that it's, this is some kind of fraud or something. It isn't. You file an application, you're giving you are giving a best faith estimate. That doesn't mean that it might even be remotely true. Because when you file an application for these tax credits, that doesn't mean that you're receiving them up front. In fact, most of these productions, remember, they don't get these film tax credits. It takes a year or two to process through after they file the return, or from the time they actually incur the expenses to when they file the return and then actually get the film tax credit. A lot of these studios will actually pre-sell them to a third party, an investor. Hey, based on what we spent, we are due a $10 million film tax credit. We as the studio would rather not have to wait an entire year to get that. We'd be willing to sell you the rights to our $10 million film tax credit that we'll get in a year for $9 million today. And an investor says, great, I will give you $9 million in cash right now. And in exchange, I will get the rights to your $10 million in film tax credit cash that will be due a year from now. That is a very stripped down, simplified version of how that works, but that is reality. Now, I'm not saying that even big companies like Warner Brothers and some of them do that with any of the money or all of the money. Some of the money, maybe, I have no idea. But that does happen. Think about things like Lionsgate when it came, or not Lionsgate, Blumhouse, when it came to Five Nights at Freddy's. They shot in Louisiana. They spent $20 million here shooting in Louisiana. They probably sold their film tax credit early because they were probably able to get $4 million in cash up front at the time they were filming the movie versus waiting for an extra $1 million a year or two later. I'm not saying they did do it. I'm saying they may have examined it. So that's what happened here. The point is with this is that this $330-something million, this thing here is fugazi. It is not real. They didn't spend $37 million in Ohio. They spent $17.5 million. And they probably didn't spend $363 million either. They probably netted out right where James Gunn in the studio said they did. Probably right around $200 to $225 million. Because there ain't no way in hell that David Zaslav would have allowed a net spend or even a gross spend of $363 million for this movie, especially not when he can film 8 hours of finished principal photography for House of the Dragon, one of the biggest shows on television around the world that brings in 25 to 30 million people a week watching it when that show comes out. Just in the U.S. alone, they spend $200 million to film an entire season of that with 8 hours of finished principal photography, with VFX, with dragons and everything else in it. You really think that David Zaslav would have let a $360 million production expense happen for Superman? Nope. And now we got the proof. It probably really was right around 225. So there you go. Our assessment on Sunday was correct. I think it's very safe to say that now. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.